This is Revs Confidential with Julian Cardillo and Frank DeLapa.
Frank, you got your coffee. You got your seat. You're a little out of frame though. You gotta tilt your camera down, my man. Just a little bit. Welcome to Revs Confidential.
Yeah.
Camera angles are interesting, but I guarantee you, Frank and I look a lot better in our current positioning than the Revolution do in theirs. Boy, oh boy, Frank. Revolution they're approaching historic lows. I put that in my article for the Herald after the Orlando result. Winless in 8 regular season games, Frank, and winless in 6 at home. That's only happened 3 times, Frank. And they treated the Orlando game, Frank, like it was a must win. But I gotta say, I think that the Montreal game on Friday is even more of a must win. Is that fair to say? What do you think, Frank?
Yeah, I think so. I think the Revolution will probably be favored against Montreal. They were actually underdogs against Orlando. You know, if you look at the teams and form and stuff, Revolution could say it was a must-win, but they were the underdogs. And I don't think they played like it was a must-win in the first half. They did in the second half. I don't think they played badly in the first half, really. One huge mistake. But that sense of urgency that you really got to have, or whatever you have to do, to get over the hump. They didn't have it until the second half. And then, it was a pretty good game then. But, yeah, so this is definitely the must-win.
Well, I think the question on a lot of people's minds, and let's not bury the lead, Frank. Caleb Porter is still coaching this team, and I had put something out last week that basically said the Crafts do not make rash decisions. That's just not what they do. They don't make rash decisions. Even when Jay Heaps was let go, that came basically 2 games after he lost 7-0 against Atlanta United. They lost 7-0 to Atlanta United. He stayed with the team for a few more days. They played Kansas City, I think it was midweek. Then another business day passed, and then they cut him after the Kansas City game. So I said, okay, if the Crafts have decided to cut Caleb Porter, that'll come after the weekend. But that hasn't happened yet, Frank. Caleb Porter's still in his position, and I have my theories on why that is. I think it's possible that the Revolution may have privately determined that he may not be the coach for them, or that at the very least it hasn't worked out. But I also equally see some reasons why they would be like, you know what, it's still too early to let him go. Before I get into those, I'm just curious, do you think that's relevant at all? What I mentioned, with the Heaps timing and how they typically don't make rash decisions. And I guess, I don't know, what do you make of this right now, Frank?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, whether the coach loses the locker room. If he loses the team, then he's done. He knows it first. The players know it, and everybody knows it. Sometimes the Crafts are a little late on that call. You kind of want to make that call a little bit before that happens, because when it happens, it's not it's not pleasant for anybody, including the coach, who at that point is kind of powerless, and that happened, I think, with Brad Friedel too. He'd lost the team, and it was time to go. So whoever's fault it was doesn't matter, because when you lose the locker room, you're done. So it doesn't come back. So I think that's what's happening here. I don't think Caleb Porter's lost the team yet. Could happen. There were signs of it maybe in the New York game, but the team kind of hung in there. And so, if they play for him, you have to keep the guy. I think it's really simple. That's what it is in almost every sport. When you lose the locker room, you're done, and that gets reflected on the field. Okay, so I don't think he's lost the team because they're losing games, but there's a fine line there too. So if they start winning, then maybe he gets them back.
Yeah, of course. So I think Brad Friedel very clearly lost the locker room. And I think the difference between Brad Friedel and Caleb Porter at this moment is that Brad Friedel was kind of throwing the players under the bus in the media, saying some really questionable things. Brett Friedel was also a new coach, didn't really have any prior club experience in such a role, whereas Caleb Porter comes in. He's really risen up the ranks of American soccer. He's got 2 MLS Cups to his name. He's a serious, experienced coach. So I don't think that he's lost the locker room. But, to go back even further, Frank, I don't think Stevie Nicol ever lost the locker room either. And the Crafts determined, midway through 2011, I think it was, that they needed to let him go. But they weren't willing to make that decision mid-season. And I think part of that was out of respect for Stevie Nicol. And honestly, if you go outside the Revolution, if you look at the Patriots, you look at what the Patriots did this past year with Gerard Mayo, I think Bob Kraft knew probably after week 8, 9, or 10 that it wasn't working out, and they'd have to cut Gerard Mayo too. But again, they waited until the end of the season to make that decision. So I guess, where does this leave Caleb Porter? For me, I see that there are basically like two or three paths. I think path number one, you stick with Caleb Porter because you feel like there are a lot of games left. 7 of them are at home. 7 of 11 are at home. They are really still mathematically in the playoff race. With that many games, the 8-point buffer really isn't that much. And you also have the summer transfer window. Now, you do need to be able to make a move, and we'll talk more about that later. But you basically say, like, Caleb Porter has plenty of time to turn it around. They can turn around their road form. They can even make some trades to make the team better. Option 2 is that you probably wait and see what happens with the Montreal game. If they tie or lose, he goes. Or option 3, you wait until the end of the season after they don't make the playoffs, and then you fire Caleb Porter. I think options 1 and 3 are far better than option 2, especially because. Well, no, let me rephrase that. I think option 2, if you take it, if you don't take it, if Caleb Porter wins against Montreal as they're expected to do, and then you just sort of keep kicking the can down the road, I don't know what that does. I personally feel like there's enough of a sample size on Caleb Porter right now to at least have the conversation. I think he is on the hot seat. He deserves to be on the hot seat. And you wouldn't really question the Revolution if they decided to make a move in the next week or so. What do you think about those scenarios, though, Frank?
Yeah, I think you pretty much hit it on the head right there. But look, if he loses the team, he just can't stay in the position because, the team's not playing for you. They ain't going to win. Some teams can actually win, when things are really going bad. But this is not a team that can do that. So, it's like they'd be going downhill and you'd have to make a move. But, if the team, look at most of this team, Caleb did bring in, so they believe in him. He believes in them, all that stuff. So you got to stay with them. And the transfer window thing, I got to say, though, that like if you're going to bring guys in, you're bringing in guys for him, so, if you're thinking of bringing in another coach, it's like, why? You might as well wait until you bring in the next coach and do it. But saying that, I think they should have brought these guys in long ago. We've been saying this since day one. We're not the only ones probably, but like this team doesn't have a striker that can pull you through, right now, I think they're waiting for Ganago to get back. And, Chankalai's now maybe coming back to form. He wasn't there yet. It took him more than a year, right? And then you could be okay. But it's like you keep waiting for these things to happen. And, it's a race against time. Like I say, a fine line. Can Caleb keep the team until, everybody's 100% and things are clicking or not? And, there's no relegation. So they could, not make the playoffs. It's not a huge price to pay. It's just not, because you're not going to get relegated. And of course you want to make the playoffs, but there's no huge reward for doing it. If you're the 9th team in, you ain't going to win it anyways. So, it's good to get in. That's a goal, but it's not the end of the world if you don't.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, Frank. So maybe let's go one at a time. One of the money quotes from me that not enough people really paid attention to over the weekend was Caleb Porter basically saying that the back line needs a leader, that the back line needs someone who can push defenders up, know when to mark, know when to step, and that right now, he likes his defenders. He likes Beeson, Fofana, and Ceballos, but no one is really taking charge to do that. I think number one, that's the first time you've ever heard Caleb Porter say that about guys that he brought in, basically that there is still a gap. The defense was kind of like this point of pride for the first 2-3 months of the year, and then things have really gone off the rails. And it's interesting because those are Caleb Porter's guys. Like presumably one of those guys, I would say either Fofana or Ceballos, were brought in to be basically center backs A and center back B, and it just hasn't happened. And so now you kind of look at the next thing, right? Where it's like similar to the point you brought up. It's like, okay, now Caleb Porter's on the hot seat and you've got these gaps. You need a striker. You probably need another defender. And, are you going to bring in guys for this coach that is on the hot seat? Like, are you going to spend time on that, spend resources on that? And so from that vantage point, I would say the answer is probably no. And they're kind of stuck with what they got. Now, on the flip side, I think they're also in some ways stuck with what they've got because they are really limited in the assets that they have. So they've got, in MLS, you've got these two roster paths. You can either have 3 DPs and I think it's 3 under 22 players who are essentially young DPs, or you can have 2 DPs and 6 under 22 players or something to that effect. The Revolution have gone with the second of these models. It might be 2 and 4, not 2 and 6. The Revolution have gone with the second of these 2 models, and they're not even really doing that right. So they've got 2 DPs, but only 2 U22s. They don't have the cap space at the moment. They need general allocation money to fund another DP slot. They need at least, I think, $200,000 to make that happen. And then they have to come up with the transfer fee, which is no problem, to get their guy in. But the whole roster construction is off. And another thing that Caleb Porter said this past weekend was talk to Kurt. Kurt's in charge of the roster. Kurt's in charge of bringing the guys in. So, now the transfer window officially opens on Thursday. And yeah, I think the coaching situation is a little bit of a mess for the Revolution, but the roster construction is a bit of a mess too. I think that they put their eggs in a lot of baskets that haven't quite panned out, Frank.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the 2 and 3 DPs and the young DPs. And I think what the plan was to see how it goes. They thought they could get to this point, and it was realistic to think they'd be like, right on the edge of playoffs. Things were okay. And then you make the decision, do you want to get another DP or 2 young DPs and really go for how are you going to do that? What are you going to need? And instead of doing that at the start, which might have worked, I don't know. But so I think that's still the plan. They're kind of sticking to the plans here. So, you got to bring in on the defenders. I got to say, I thought those guys have played well. The goals against is still pretty good. I think it's been a problem since day one that there's not a ton of communication, not just with those guys. The whole team is not a team that communicates a lot. It's just one of those things. Different languages, different cultures, different backgrounds, etc. Not in their nature. Okay, these guys are good players, but that's been something I've been hearing since day one. There's a couple guys that do all the time. You have to communicate on the field. But where these guys came from, maybe you didn't have to communicate as much. That wasn't measured. Okay, all these acquisitions and everything are to spec. And all these guys they brought in are good. And I think they're perfectly good for MLS. It can work. It's those intangibles that they didn't check out, or it's really hard to check out, And so that's your team. So like you say, I think you're stuck with that roster. Whoever's here has got to make it work.
Well, what I'm surprised by is that there's no flexibility, right? They're really stuck. I mean, I don't think they could even bring in a minimum player without making some kind of a move. Now that may not be fully correct. We need some specifics from the front office there, but any real move of note that doesn't go to the supplemental roster would require some kind of a move. Like the general allocation money is mostly toast. And then that's according to the league website. The league website posts the amount of allocation money available. And so they couldn't add another DP at this moment if they wanted to. They probably couldn't add a U22 player if they wanted to. And it's interesting because they had chosen to go this way, right? They weren't all in February or March when they had to choose a roster pathway. They had the option of having their max DPs and their max U22s, and they didn't do it. Same thing goes with the second path. They had their option to max out the U22s, and they didn't do it. And when I look at the way the roster's constructed, right, I think the depth is reasonably okay. I do think that there have been some untimely injuries. I do think, as you've pointed out a few times, Frank, that maybe like the communication, the more cultural aspects, the weather have really started to compound with this team. And it's been a major culprit to why Caleb Porter's had to throw things, make makeshift formations and throw players into different roles. But there are some fairly big contracts on this team. And I think the Revolution are going to have to find a way to open up that space. And you run into this thing of, who wants to make a deal with a team that's outside the playoff line. So I think they might be stuck. And it'll be interesting to see what Caleb Porter and Curtin Alfo say as the transfer window opens. Because right now, I just think their options look really limited, Frank.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to go back to the defenders one last time, though. If you look at the Revolution's central defense and Orlando's, it's like, I'll take Revolution's guys over those guys, or at least they're not any worse. But the difference is, Orlando's, those guys have been together for 3+ years. So you need that. You got to give guys time to click, get that chemistry, because there's fine lines in the back there. So, I think that's, to be fair, and when you make a whole roster rip up and start over, you got to go through these pains of figuring stuff out. Whereas if you get a little consistency, which is key in communication on the field, that's how you get chemistry. Okay, now as far as bringing in, now I'm told though that they could have got a DP, so I don't know where that comes from, but they've got 2 and there's room for 1. How all that stuff plays out, you got the Messi rule or the Beckham rule or whatever. I think they could probably get a DP in here if they want it. I think, though, the caveat is that who wants to come here, right? I think that's a real problem. If you're LA, you get, guys that played in the World Cup, and they'll come for like $200,000 or $300,000 because they got all their money. That's not happening here, so it's a little tougher. You're going to bring in somebody that, is not a high profile, but it's a tough fit right here. And I think it made Bruce Arena became really frustrated over that. He was used to getting his guys who he wanted, and here, I think people weren't picking up the phone or they just weren't coming. And that could be happening now too. But I think there is actually room. If you could convince somebody, to come here, I think they could pull the trigger.
Well, they'd have to change their whole roster build. They'd have to change the makeup. They'd have to tell the league they're changing. Now, they have the flexibility to do it, but they'd have to make the change. And then they'd have to have the amount of allocation money to support the third DP. That's if they want a DP. They could always go out and get a U22 guy, Frank. But, again, if you want someone to come in and score goals or keep them out, presumably you're looking for someone with an established pedigree. And that person probably isn't 22 years old or younger, right? So it's like when Bruce Arena came on board and he wanted goals, he got Gustavo Bo, who was 29 at the time. And I remember, he was an established goal scorer. He was quite a good player, but it was like, well, is this the guy we want to use a DP slot on, who's going to be 30 before next season? And it ended up working out really well. That was one of Bruce's guys. Luca Langoni, young player, he's a U22, really hasn't worked out too well with him. I know there have been injuries. He's had to battle back from, but that hasn't been it. And they've given that player a lot of assets. And so that's one that you maybe reevaluate in the winter, in the off season. I think Chankalai has been really positive in spurts. He did change the game on Saturday, but again, he's a designated player. So you would think he's on the field from the get-go. and he wasn't. He had to come in at halftime, and he changed the game. Like I said, did a really good job. Leonardo Campana is, he hasn't been what the Revolution have wanted. Let's put it that way. But that's more on like the talent and technical side. Another thing that Caleb Porter said after the Orlando game, which I thought really deserves revisiting, is what he said about being a strong player between the ears, the mentality conversation. That's something that Brad Friedel will talk about too. And that's what a lot of losing coaches blame when things aren't going their way. It's like, we've got great players. They're very talented. We feel like we're game planning well. The team is with me. The team is motivated. The team is united. It's the mentality. Okay. I feel like the Revolution have invested a lot in the club infrastructure over the last 5 years. They've got the training complex. They've got a corner kick coach. They've got a goalkeeper coach. They used to, and probably still do, have some analytics. I don't know what they're doing in terms of sports psychology, because I do think that that's the sort of thing that can win teams points. And I do think that's something that you see teams in Europe invest in as well. I don't know if you had a similar thought as that, Frank, when that was brought up, or if you've even thought about that in the past, because Caleb Porter is not the first person to bring up the mental aspect. I mean, these are pro athletes. I wasn't a pro soccer player, but I competed at a really high level in my sport. We had sports psychologists. This is the top league, the top soccer league in America and Canada. Maybe it's time the Revolution invested in a sports psychologist, Frank.
Yeah, instead of a set piece coach, I think Julian would say. But yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Okay, on that one, I would say I'm not sure what he was actually saying there. I think there's some kind of just instincts, soccer IQ. Here's what you do in this situation. That I think more of that than not having the the mental fortitude or whatever. These guys seem strong enough mentally, but just what do you do in these situations? Those little, type situation. Now, saying that, Caleb always had guys in Columbus and Portland that knew what to do. It seemed like in those situations, and they got that little edge, and that's what made the difference. And he's kind of saying these guys sometimes don't have it, but I just got to say that, he just threw this roster together. I'm trying to throw it together. It's a planned roster. They haven't been together long enough. There's not a lot of chemistry sometimes. You don't have that guy that does that, says, speaks up when you need to, makes that little tactical change or whatever. They don't maybe have that. And, maybe that evolves. Maybe that takes a year to find that guy. I don't know. But, look, they had 3 weeks of training in Bradenton, and then they started the season. It's like, that could work. But, on the other hand, you start seeing there's some holes in there, and now we're finding out what they are. So I think in some senses that went to plan. Now they said, all right, now when this window opens, we got to bring in the guys to fix what we didn't know we were missing. So this is a big time. I don't know why the league's transfer window is different than everybody else's, but, they need that thing to open like today, not Thursday.
So, Frank, you're bringing up a lot of stuff that is mostly out of Caleb Porter's control. Do you feel that, forget about what you know about the Crafts and, with what we've seen from MLS teams in the past, do you think he deserves to keep coaching this team? Or maybe you don't want to answer that question, but
I'm good with it.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think he deserves to keep coaching it. If he loses the locker room, then, he doesn't. But I think, because the next guy that comes in doesn't necessarily have the belief of the players, doesn't know what he's getting into, he doesn't really have, Caleb Porter knows a ton about this team, and he didn't before he came here, now he had to learn, remember last year, and it took a while, and then he figured out whatever. I think you got to stay with the coach until he loses the locker room, and that could happen. Look, I think that probably what happened in Columbus. They won the championship, then they didn't make the playoffs the next 2 years. Was that the team, quitting on Caleb? I don't know, but you have to stay with the guy until it's not working. Now, and to be fair, I think you got to give him the whole season. Look at the Revolution management brought in Caleb Porter to set up the team like this at the back, to where they're not just giving up a ton of goals. I think the goal difference is -2 even though whatever their record is, 6-10-7. So, you're in every game. They've really only lost 2 games by more than 1 goal, right? 2. And so they're in every game. That's what they hired him to do, Now, of course, you want to get to the next point where you're not losing those games. But I think until, it starts blowing up, somebody's got to be right on top of it. And then he probably wouldn't deserve to be here. But I think it's in his hands. It's in the team's hands, really. If the players want to go play for him, then he's still here.
Well, so it's interesting. The one bit I want to go back to is that, if he hasn't lost the locker room, why move him? And that a new guy might not come in and understand how things are set up and might not have the relationships, probably won't have the relationships. And so are you really better off? One thing worth noting is okay, let's say they do part with Caleb Porter, who then comes in? I think that's what you're really getting at, Frank. So Pablo Moreira he's the assistant coach of the Revolution, has been with Caleb Porter since the University of Akron days, right? So presumably Moreira, even if he sticks around on an interim basis, he won't be around much longer just because it's kind of a continuation of the Porter methodology. And honestly, he may want to link up with Caleb Porter somewhere else. I know that on social media, people mention Jim Curtin. But again, I don't know how much Jim Curtin wants to come to a team mid-season. I think he'd rather wait it out and see what's going on in November and October. So the point, Frank, is that really there are no good immediate options if they were to part with Caleb Porter tomorrow. And I think from my vantage point, that's probably the best reason not to do something immediate either. So it's you've got plenty of games left, but who do you sort of make the coach in the interim? And can they do anything with the roster that's going to be meaningful and set them up for the success down the stretch? Now, on the flip side, though, the Revolution have had some success over a midseason coaching change. Stevie Nicol is probably the best example, but certainly Bruce Arena as well. And maybe Stevie Nicol is the one to focus on here because he came in with very little coaching experience. And managed to take the team over, and over time they did quite well, Frank.
Stevie Nicol, probably the best coach the Revolution have had until Bruce Arena. I'm sure they have coaches. I know guys I could bring right in probably right now, and they'd be fine. They'd probably do really well. It's not right though, and like you say, like Jim Curtin probably doesn't want to come in under these circumstances. Not under these circumstances, who wants to come here, really? I mean, unless you get huge assurances. Now, this has to go both ways. That means the Revolution's got to pay off that one coach and make a huge commitment. You bring in a good coach, he's want to bring in his whole own staff. Like you said, Pablo, everybody's probably out. That's just the way it works. Now you got a huge commitment to the next guy. And it's not just the money. It's like a real commitment, right? You got a multi-year contract. People are moving here, and you say, this is our guy, and we're going to go with him until the end. And that's what they did with Caleb Porter. So, and they did with Bruce Arena too. You've got to if you get a proven coach, he's going to want all that stuff. Now, in other sports, maybe other countries, that stuff happens a lot. It doesn't happen in MLS as much, right? Hasn't been much turnover this year. And Revolution are well ahead of a few teams still. So, I think they're got to keep going along. But it's a major decision. And I think, like you said, the Crafts don't take it lightly.
Yeah. So, there's really nowhere to go from here, but more games to be played, right? So they've got Montreal coming up. Highly winnable game, must-win game. If the Revolution don't win that game, I think that probably is actually the nail in the coffin of their playoff hopes. It's really hard to see them rebounding from a loss like that, just given how bad Montreal has been all season long. Now, it's not without its challenges. Carlos Gil is going to be on short rest from the All-Star game. I know he probably won't play too much. He might get 15 minutes, might get 20 minutes, but point is he'll play, he'll travel. There's a lot of energy around that, and Revs need him if they're going to get a result out of the Montreal game. Doesn't matter how bad Montreal have been. And then, you look ahead, and I had sort of done this late last week as well, as okay, realistically, who do the Revolution need to beat out to really compete for a playoff spot? And I think the two teams to watch right now are Chicago and Charlotte. Revs play Chicago twice, once home, once away. In fact, one of those games is the regular season finale at Gillette Stadium. So it's got some 04 MLS playoff race vibes for those of you who were following the team back then. And then they play Charlotte on August 30th at Gillette Stadium. All three of those games are must-wins, in my view, just given the state of things. And I'm going to agree with Caleb Porter that every game from here on out at Gillette Stadium is a must-win. Now, I'll also say that it's been very surprising to see how poor the Revolution have been at Gillette Stadium this year. It's not something that we're used to, Frank. And I really can't figure out why. And I think part of it might be that the teams have just kind of gotten over the turf. There are more stadiums with turf now in MLS, certainly not the majority, but there are enough of them. Seattle comes to mind, Atlanta comes to mind. And it's just not a big deal. And, Lionel Messi is playing on turf too. It's not the big deal it used to be. And teams are coming in and they're aggressive and they've got strong attacking players and the Revs are committing lapses and it's just not working out right now at home. But they have to figure that out soon, Frank, especially with 7 of the final 11 games at home.
Yeah, I think you brought up, I'm going to digress real quick on the All-Star. Julian brought it up, and this is probably the anti-All-Star podcast, you guys. So if anybody's listening, because you'll know our opinions on that whole thing. But yeah, I think the problem at home is that it's always been, teams come in, don't want to play that much really. So they just kind of lock it up and hit on the counter. And this Revolution team is sort of set up to do the same thing. So when they have to open up at home, then when they do, they're better on the road when they go away. They're underdog mode. Look, at a lot of these guys haven't played at Gillette that many times, even now. So it's not that much of a home field thing. And the sort of their best success has been on the road when they can sit back a little bit, counter themselves, feel like the underdogs. When they come home, it's sort of that role reversal, and unfortunately, it works against the Revolution. That's the only explanation I can come up with, because you ask guys on the team and nobody can figure this out. 2-6-2 at home, it's like that shouldn't happen. But I think it's sort of that mentality and tactics.
Yeah, and listen, that's only happened 3 times, Frank. Happened in 2011, happened in 1998, and those were historically bad seasons for the Revolution. Usually doesn't happen. And yeah, I mean, they've been better on the road. I'll say, Frank, when I look at this team, I think about their inability to adjust. And I know we spent some time talking about the mental edge that they may or may not have. I do think the adjustment bit is partially on Caleb Porter, because from what I can tell, he's really good at prepping for games. It's more about, at halftime or after a big moment, getting the team on the same page, having them stay disciplined is really challenging. And sometimes it's mental, but other times it's tactical. It's Jekyll and Hyde, though, because at times they do a really good job of getting the ball in the back of the net. That was the New York game. Other times they have a really, really hard time keeping it out. That was the second half of the New York game. On the flip side, nothing really happened in that first half against Orlando. That was a really poor goal to give up. That was another just error in concentration, I think. But they didn't really push the game in the first half. And I don't think it was purely tactical. I just think that they were afraid of taking risks. They weren't making the right runs. And so it is so Jekyll and Hyde with this group of, like, they're incapable of defending well and attacking well simultaneously.
Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah, look at it. It's sort of a work in progress. It shouldn't be, but you can see it. It's like they kind of remember, look at the first game of the season. They went to Nashville, which is like, we found out that's a really good team. And they said, we got to go in there and get a result. And they did, That was like, so that was an accomplishment. So they were able to kind of do that stuff early on. And then, you hit a bit of a wall. There's suspensions, there's injuries, there's this and that. And they haven't been able to adjust to it. So I just think, other teams, look at most of these other teams that are doing well have some continuity, and Revolution just doesn't have much continuity. I mean, this is a whole new roster, it's a whole new way of playing and everything. And it all makes sense on paper. It looks good, but, the reality is, once you get out there, it's different.
But does it look good though? So that's another thing, right? You talk about the continuity. The Revolution had continuity. This team is slowly losing the bones that made this team so good during the Supporter Shield winning season. Bruce Arena has found a way to reunite with a lot of those guys. And when I look at this team, I think to myself, they have a San Jose Earthquakes problem. All of their domestic acquisitions in the last year have come from the Earthquakes. The Earthquakes last year were a terrible team. I mean, I think Tanner Beeson has been really solid in moments. There's a reason he's a starter. I think he's shown a lot of good stuff. But the Quakes were a horrendous team last year. They gave up a lot of goals. Jackson Ewell is on $1 million contract, Frank. That's guaranteed through 2027. He's played 6 games. Jackson Ewell, I don't think he's ever been further than the first round of the playoffs. So there just aren't a lot of gamers that have come in from San Jose. And like I said, a lot of these guys have come from the Quakes. Teams have given Bruce Arena a lot of good deals in the past. Not all of them have worked out, but I'd be afraid to do a deal with Bruce Arena. And the Revolution have enabled a lot of their former guys to go back to him, either directly or indirectly. So to me, that's a problem, right? You talk about it looking good on paper. I think in some respects it does look good on paper, but I also don't know if this team has the experience to really win in MLS. Certainly the newer players don't because they're not used to the league, but even the guys that they've brought in who are established veterans, I do have my doubts about them. And I think there is an over-reliance, especially in midfield, on Polster and Yusuf. Certainly there's an over-reliance on Carlos Heel, and I think teams have begun to figure him out to some degree. The chance creation is still there, but if you take Heel away, if you just foul him to death, if you surround him with 3 players, Chancalay, Campana, and Ganago, the numbers show it. They don't hurt you the same way that Gustavo Bo and Adam Buxa did 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. You're right on most of that stuff, Julian. I'm going to just cut to this one that we've said from day one is like, if you have like a center forward that is a beast up there and scores goals, right? Like no matter what, all these problems go away, or most of them, maybe, if you got a guy up there that's got 10, 12 goals now, which then you're probably okay. They don't have a guy that's even close to that though, so I think that's been the biggest failing. And, it just covers up so many problems. It's the hardest thing to do sometimes. You're a single striker and you got to score goals, but there's guys out there that can do it. I think the Revolution spent a lot of time getting everything but that. It's like now I think you got to get a guy that can do that. Saying that it's tough now because the guy's going to come in with like 9-10 games left and he's going to like all of a sudden fit in, turn it around. I don't know. Tough call right there. Guys can do it, but those guys probably not available, So I think they kind of boxed themselves into a corner. I think you needed to get that guy from day one. I don't care who it was. Other teams got him. We've already talked about that. You had to pay X millions to do it, but those teams are good.
Well, I think they expected it to be Campana, Frank. That's who
right.
They gave him basically $2.5 million. They surrendered a whole bunch of their cap space. And that talk about it looking good on paper, that's one that made sense in the moment. Certainly he's a player who torched the Revolution last year and the year before, but it just hasn't worked out.
Yeah, that's a good call on that one too. But also it's caveat emptor. Like Denke, I think was 16 million. And whoever you can throw those other guys, you're getting your money's worth on those guys. With Leo, if you came through, great. But otherwise, the expectations were high, but the investment wasn't that high. So were the expectations realistic? Good call. I mean, I got nothing bad to say about Leo. I think he could be the answer. He's been injured. They had to figure that out, and it doesn't hurt. Like Bruce Arena would have brought in another guy anyway, right?
Yeah, and listen, I think if Bruce was still here, he probably would have brought in Joseph Martinez. Said, look, you scored a bunch of goals on turf in Atlanta. Come to Foxborough.
Chicho.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Listen, I see there are a few people who have joined in live. A small handful of you. Feel free, if you'd like, to drop a question in the chat. You could also like the video, share it. Subscribe to Cover the Pitch, where I've got some other content. That's where the Revs Confidential podcast is housed that Frank and I try to put out weekly. This is new to do it live streamed. We're very eager to hear from you. So thanks a lot for that. Yeah, Frank, I had a transfer rumor that it was not my rumor. I just said that it was out there, that the Revolution were among three MLS teams looking at Patrick Cutrone, who's a player that both you and I know because we follow Serie A very closely. I didn't want to put like a number on the chances of that being a real rumor. I do think that there is a chance that the Revolution are looking at a profile like that. Certainly they need one. But at the very least, Frank, they're looking in the right direction. I think they need to find a guy who can put goals away. Probably, I have more confidence. I know I mentioned a little while ago that they're really struggling to both attack well and defend well at the same time. I have more confidence in their defending right now than their attack, which is ironic because I think their attack has turned the corner a little bit. So yeah, I'd be all for them exploring something with a player like Cutrone, but I think that is a tougher sell, and guy like that might want to stay in Italy.
Yeah, good call. I don't think that many guys want to come here, unfortunately. But yeah, any guy that starts in Serie A with a decent team, or the Bundesliga, or La Liga, those guys would do well here. And Cutrone he'd be really great. I just don't think that, he's probably looking at that situation and it might not look any better than what he's seeing over there. I think these guys want to come in and play on a nice grass field, have some of those advantages and be on a team that looks like they're doing well. I think the biggest sell that the Revolution have is Carles Gil. Carles Gil is a guy that anybody would want to play with. So I think maybe they have a chance to get anybody if they can sell them on that, because this guy's a special player. We don't say it enough. He's worth the price of admission. I think everybody in this town has been missing out if they haven't seen him play. He's a highlight show every game. Teams are, like you say, they're figuring him out, but he still does enough, in a game. Few things every game that are like highlights. So I think that's how you sell a striker coming in here.
Yeah, well, you figure if you're a striker and you want to score goals, you get the best playmaker in the league, not named Lionel Messi, and it all works out. I've been very surprised that the attack has been as toothless as it has been this year, Frank. I really thought that, mostly because last year Caleb Porter had said it wasn't his team yet. He really wanted to find his type of profile of player. And for the most part, I think he did. I understood wanting to keep Chancalay and going out and getting Langoni and Ganago as well. I think those are all really good profiles, but in terms of the execution, it just hasn't been there. And even having a player like Carles Gil, it just goes to show you that even in MLS, having a game-changing player like that, only having one isn't enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the Revolution made a kind of a basic maybe mistake. It was like you surround Carles Gil with the guys that compliment him. Look, Leo Messi came to Miami. He wasn't coming to Miami alone. I mean, he looked at that situation. He said, all right, I'm coming, but you got to give me 3 guys from Barca, right? As many as you can. And that's how it works out. I mean, he doesn't do it alone. Even against the Revolution, hooking up with Sergio Busquets, that's that goal that he scored was, that's the difference. And guys like that need to be surrounded by guys that are on the same page. And Carlos hasn't really had that, but it's kind of worked out. But let's say if you did get him, I think when he had Buxa and Bo, like you mentioned, fine. You've got to give him guys that can work with him. Otherwise, it's a bit of an uphill struggle. It kind of works. Maybe it doesn't, but I think Carlos has had a chance. Teams had a chance to bring in a couple strikers that really would communicate with Carlos. They haven't done it. Maybe they'll do it now. I mean, really, that's the one thing, really. And that's the one thing, you don't snap your fingers and get it done. But if they did bring in a striker that could, finish off Carlos's balls, I mean, they'd be all set. I mean, they might not go far in the playoffs, but you could see them, getting there.
Yeah. I mean, you look at some of the most successful teams right now. They found strikers. They're not necessarily these big name players. I think Sam Saric has been one of the biggest
Yeah.
surprises. He comes in, he just has a nose for the goal. Actually reminds me a lot of Taylor Twellman, to be honest with you, Frank. Just finds a way to score every week. He's the reason why Nashville has been so successful. And yeah, by the way, I noted this in my previous article, Frank. Revolution have surrendered 20 hat tricks in their MLS history. And Martin Ojeda, who single-handedly dismantled the Revolution on Saturday, 5 of his 12 goals this season have come against the Revolution.
Yeah, that's kind of a weird thing, but it's kind of true. Let's see, that's almost a mental thing too. One thing that, really good players and teams do when you have a really strong mentality is you don't let that happen. Leo Campana got a nice hat trick against the Revolution too, right? I mean, when you have guys like, Roy Keane out there, for an example, that don't happen, You get a goal, okay, you earn it, but, fool me twice, that's on me. And they start taking guys out and they go down with the ship. Revolution hasn't really had that kind of mentality since, many years ago in the Stevie Nicol days when everybody had that mentality. I talked to Avery John after the last game, who was a real key part. He still has a part of the game day operations. And that was sort of the conclusion I came to talking to him, is that those guys had chemistry and they fought against each other in training or whatever, but then when it came for game, they fought for each other. And, that doesn't just happen. You got to have that chemistry. It happened. It comes about. However, it's an intangible. It's almost alchemical. When it happens, you're good. And the Revolution, it's questionable if they have that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you bring all that up because they're going to welcome some of their old greats on the 9th. And it, 30 seasons, we've been talking about it a few times over the course of the season. What all that means. And I still think, Frank, that a lot of those teams from the 02 to 09 years were really some of the best in league history. And I remember we had Michael Parkhurst on the show a year and a half or so ago, and he said, it was a different era of MLS, but his belief was that if you were good then, you'd find a way to be good now. And that bit about really fighting for one another, the Jay Heaps and not Jay Heaps, excuse me, Joe Franchino and Clint Dempsey could fist fight on multiple occasions to get fined and get separated and suspended, and then be the best of teammates on Saturday night. I'm not saying you want the Revolution to be fighting right now, of course not, but I think it's just a different level. And maybe I'm kind of selling this team short a little bit, right? Maybe it's good that they haven't lost the locker room, but I do think there's like this level of fight. And also this attitude that they had that they were going to win when Bruce Arena was the coach, that it really seems to be missing now. Going into halftime of the Red Bulls game, which we haven't talked about yet, it is a little bit of old news, but going into halftime up 2-0, you still felt like that 2-0 lead wasn't safe. That if the Red Bulls found a way to score a goal in the first 15 minutes, anything could happen. And anything happened, and it was the doomsday scenario. And it just... back then, right, whether you're talking about the Arena days or the Nickel days, that sort of collapse was not going to happen. In fact, the Bruce Arena teams used to make that collapse happen of other teams. They'd score these ridiculous goals in stoppage time and find a way to get points. So, if I'm Carlos Gil, you're looking back at what it was like just 2-3 years ago. I think you're wondering like what is missing. And yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait and see, Frank.
Yeah, it's fine lines. It's those things that separate the coaches. And look, the Revolution's been lucky to have guys like Steve Nicol and Bruce Arena, two of the best coaches in league history. I mean, we're lucky to have seen how those guys operate and how they got things done. They're much different backgrounds and this and that, but how they got results, how they got locker rooms, how they got the team motivated. They're really great motivators, and tactically, made the right moves. And, They didn't always dominate, right? Like you're saying, like I'm agreeing. Sometimes they had to, figure it out and come from behind, but they always had that belief and came through. But yeah, I mean, it's a real test right now. I mean, can this team pass the test? That's the thing. Those teams had look at that first year when Stevie Nickel came in. That was a mid-season change or a really early season. I think it was after 7 games. The Revolution were 2-4-1. They just lost 5-2 in Colorado, and they pulled the plug on Fernando Clavillo. And Stevie Nickel came in. They won the first game against LA. Then they went on this huge losing streak. They were like ready to. Stevie was not going to make it through the season. Then all of a sudden, they caught fire, and from then on, Stevie was the coach for the next 10 years. So you got to kind of stay with it and see what happens. But it's intangibles. How that happened, I mean, we've described it in the past, and you just couldn't make it up. But it worked, and they got to the final in 2002, and got to a total of 5 finals now.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'm sure there are a number of people that want Caleb Porter gone, no matter what, right? And so there are probably some who feel like if they keep winning, if they find a way to turn it around, it's going to extend Caleb Porter's time with the team. And they're probably not going to do well in the playoffs this year anyway, even if they make the playoffs. But on the flip side, I just did a story in the Herald, Frank. They're breaking attendance records every year. There are more people coming to see this team. And that basically, we were expecting that for them to really make a big transformational change in the amount of eyeballs on the team. Especially with this new Apple TV deal that's taken so many people away from being able to watch it with cable, that they would need the stadium in Boston. And while I do think that is still true, they absolutely need the stadium in Boston. The marketing of this team is working. Like they're finding ways to get more butts in seats on a weekly basis. And it's not just the Messi game. I think the numbers bear it out. It is not just the Messi game. There were 25,000 people in the stands this past weekend. And no Messi in sight. He was on a different Florida team. And so if I look at it from that perspective, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe they do need to make a coaching change, but you still want to see the team put on a good show. You still want to see these fans have an excuse to come back. And if they choke or if they just keep losing, I think it's going to really hurt the game day environment in the future.
Yeah, I think you need to reward the fans for coming out, and they need to have a reason to come. I think a lot of people just come because it's the only game in town. It's the only pro team for 6 states, really, at that level, D1 level. So, yeah, and it's still a good thing to watch. I think Carles Gil is worth the price of admission. I talked to a couple. There's just tons of little kids they bring out to these games. I talked to a couple of them before the game. They probably had a vocabulary of I don't know how many words. They're like little kids, but they love Carles Gil, So I think there's reasons to come and see the team. But at some point, yeah, I mean, if people are dissatisfied and they stop coming out, then that's another reason that the coach doesn't last very long. But as long as they're coming out, like you say, I mean, the interest is there. People are coming to watch the games, and I think it'll continue. But you do have to. At some point, though, you have to give them hope.
Well, and what's interesting is that for that article in the Herald, I was speaking to Cathal Conlon, who heads up the team's marketing, and he said, the hardest people to get to renew year on year are the first year season ticket holders, and I guess that makes sense, right? But if you're getting more first year season ticket holders every year, and these season ticket holders come on in a year where they're only winning 2 games at home. There's not a whole. I mean, assuming you want to win, you want to watch a winning team. I'm sure there are some people who are in it with the team, sink or swim, rain or shine. But that plays into it as well. And so it's obviously easier to market the team and to get more people invested in coming if it's winning, or at the very least if they're entertaining. And yeah, I mean it's been hard from that respect too. So just from like a fan environment point of view. I wouldn't want to see the team lose just to get rid of Caleb Porter.
Yeah, I think people are coming out and actually, they're expressing themselves these days. I think in the past, maybe not as much, where people just were definitely coming, and the team was winning more at home. And so I think they were just happy with just being there kind of. Now you're seeing a little more of a, an involved kind of a connection with fans. It's probably not great that they're booing the team, but there's a reason for it, and you're hearing that. So I guess that's good. I mean, the fans need to have input. These are club supporters, the team supporters. So that's their say, and if they're saying we're not liking what we're seeing, that's a big say, and that goes into the equation as well.
All right, Franco. We covered a lot of distance today. We've been on for just about an hour. Any parting words before the Revolution take on the Montreal Impact on Friday night?
Yeah, I mean, those kids I was talking to were one of them was looking forward to seeing Giacomo Vrioni come back. So, I mean, even the little kids are, kind of into it. They know the players and they like what they see. I think you do have to reward them. If this team starts winning, I think average attendance was 29K last year. You'll go over 30K. I think that's a big, transition right there. If they can get to 30K average, that's something, big statement.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so most entertaining thing to come out of All-Star Week, and I'm going to give Caleb Pongratz credit for this from Prost America. You got Carlos Heel to say that he was looking forward to seeing Giacomo Vrioni this weekend too, and Carlos is hoping that Vrioni gets another red card. That would be something.
Yeah.
But we'll have to wait and see. Vrioni is going to come in very motivated. This is a game the Revolution not just should win, but they have to win. And we'll see. We'll evaluate what happens if they fall short. Make sure you subscribe to the Boston Globe so you can get all of Frank's coverage of the Revolution. Frank, you're on Twitter, also known as X, at Frank DeLapa. I'm here on Cover the Pitch, both this YouTube channel and my Substack. Please like and subscribe. Make sure you share this content. I'm trying to introduce some more video content to the Revolution beat. Most importantly, I'm covering this team for the Boston Herald now, and you can actually subscribe to the Herald for $1 a year, which is a crazy, crazy amount of money in a good way. So if you like my coverage of the Herald, make sure that you subscribe to get it. And I'm on X as well at Julian Cardillo. Thanks a lot for the for the Revs Confidential theme song. That is full credit to Neil Rosenthal on that. And this is Revs Confidential signing off.